The rotor thundered above the pine trees, cutting through the gray Georgia morning like a saw through steel. Sheriff Dale Harmon gripped the doorframe of the county helicopter, his jaw tight as the wind howled in. Below, the small-town airfield stretched out, a patchwork of cracked asphalt and rusted hangars glinting in weak sunlight. Beside him, 2 deputies struggled to hold the woman. Her wrists were cuffed tight, the chain biting into her skin. She was in her 40s, tall, composed despite the storm around her. The badge pinned to her blouse was half hidden under the wind's tug. "Sheriff!" Deputy Kellen shouted over the noise. "She's resisting!" The woman didn't raise her voice. "You're making a mistake. I'm law enforcement too." The sheriff barked a short laugh. "Not today, you're not. You assaulted an officer. My officer. Her name was Sergeant Maya Cole, but no one in that chopper seemed to care. She'd come home on leave, still in uniform, though from a different world. Her army insignia gleamed faintly under the morning sun. Kellen yanked the cuff chain, forcing her to her knees near the open door. The wind whipped her braids across her face. "I told you," Maya said, her tone low but steady. "You're detaining the wrong person. The man you want's still down there." "Quiet," Harmon snapped. He gestured to the deputy pilot. "Take her over the ridge." "No one needs to see this," the pilot hesitated. "Sir, that's—" "Do it." The chopper banked right, slicing toward the tree line. The ground blurred, a swirl of green and gold. The air smelled of engine oil and pine sap. Inside, the tension felt heavier than gravity. Kellen leaned close to her ear. "You should have just shown ID." Maya's eyes narrowed. "I did, twice." Harmon reached for the door latch. "End of the line, Sergeant." "Sheriff," the pilot called. "We're too low for—" The sheriff's hand slammed the latch. The door groaned open, wind roaring like a beast. And in that chaos, Maya moved. No struggle, no scream. Just a flicker of calm calculation. Her fingers brushed the small badge still clipped to her vest. "Sir," she said evenly, "you really don't know who I am." Then came the sound. Sharp, metallic. Not from her, but from the radio pinned to Harmon's chest. "Dispatch to Sheriff Harmon, urgent federal patch incoming. Stand by for identification verification on subject Sergeant Maya Cole. U.S. Army Aviation Command." Every head turned. The sheriff froze, his boot inches from her shoulder. "Repeat," the radio crackled. "Sergeant Maya Cole, authorized armed personnel. Clearance level 3. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage." The rotor thudded harder. Kellen swallowed. "Sir, what's going on?" Harmon's face drained of color. She's military?" Maya met his eyes. "That's right. And I don't need a parachute." She shifted her weight, her cuffed hands sliding beneath her knees, a motion learned from endless drills. The deputies lunged too late. She dove not out but under, grabbing a safety line coiled near the floor. In one motion, she hooked it around her wrists and rolled toward the door, wind battering her as the chopper shuddered. "Stop her," Harmon shouted, but the pilot's voice cut through, panicked. "If you move her, we'll tip." Outside, the small town gleamed in the morning light. Tiny houses, old church steeples. One open diner sign flickering breakfast special. Maya's voice rose, calm and certain. "You think power's in your badge, Sheriff? But real authority comes from what's right." The radio crackled again. "Federal response en route, ETA 2 minutes. Harmon's fingers twitched. The door still hung open, the wind screaming louder now. And the truth, whatever it was, hung with it. The sheriff stared at her, the weight of what he'd done sinking in as the trees rushed below. And for the first time, the woman in cuffs didn't look like a suspect. She looked like the only one still in control. The helicopter touched down hard, skidding slightly on the cracked tarmac of Ridgefield County Airfield. Dust swirled up, wrapping the scene in a dull haze. Sheriff Harmon jumped out first, barking orders. "Get her inside the hangar, now." Deputies Kellen and Brooks dragged Sergeant Maya Cole out of the chopper. Her boots hit the ground with a firm thud. Despite the cuffs biting into her wrists, she walked upright, chin high, eyes clear. Inside the hangar, the smell of engine oil mixed with dust and old coffee. The sheriff slammed the door behind them, muting the sound of the blades. "Talk," Harmon demanded. "You show up on my airfield carrying a firearm, wearing a military badge nobody here recognizes. And you expect me to believe you're one of us?" Maya's reply was quiet but sharp. "I'm not one of you, Sheriff. I serve above your jurisdiction." The deputies exchanged uncertain glances. Her calmness unsettled them. There was no anger, no pleading, just quiet authority. "I told your men," she said. "I'm on assignment from the Army Aviation Command. Humanitarian Relief Coordination, flight route mapping. You detained me in uniform, confiscated my credentials, and now—" "Credentials?" Harmon interrupted. "We found nothing but a military patch and a half-torn ID card." Maya frowned. "Because your deputy tore it when he shoved me into the truck." Brooks looked away. A small silence fell. The sheriff shifted uneasily, but pride stiffened his posture. "Until I hear from command, you're under arrest for obstructing county investigation." "What investigation?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, Harmon gestured to Kellen. "Put her in holding. We'll sort this when the feds call back." Outside, sunlight filtered through the hangar's gaps, tracing lines across the concrete floor. A boy about 10 stood near the chain-link fence holding a phone. His mother worked at the diner across the road. The airfield was his playground. He whispered into the phone camera, filming the scene. "They got her in cuffs, but she's not fighting." His video would go live online within the hour. In the makeshift holding area, Maya sat on a metal chair, the cuffs now attached to a pipe. Her mind replayed the scene, every movement, every word. Training taught her to stay composed. Emotions were tools, not weaknesses. She looked toward the small window. The chopper gleamed outside, its rotors still slowing. The sound was fading, replaced by the quiet hum of an approaching engine. A county patrol car rolled up. From it stepped Agent Lyle, a tall man in plain clothes with a federal badge clipped to his belt. He walked straight past the deputies. "Who's in charge here?" Harmon stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Sheriff Harmon. We detained an active duty officer with federal clearance," Lyle cut in. "And you nearly dropped her from a helicopter. You know how many laws that breaks?" The sheriff's mouth opened, but no words came. Agent Lyle turned toward Maya. "Sergeant Cole, you okay?" She nodded once. "Yes, sir. Thank you for coming." Lyle faced the deputies again. She was en route to coordinate an Army medical drill. "Everything she told you could have been verified with one call. One." The hangar fell silent except for the echo of the federal badge hitting the sheriff's desk. Harmon swallowed hard. "You're saying she's legitimate?" Lyle's gaze was cold. "Legitimate enough that Washington's already asking for a report." Maya looked up, her voice steady. "Sheriff, I don't want an apology. I want to know why you were flying that low over restricted ground, and why a woman in uniform made you this nervous." For a moment, the proud sheriff looked smaller, like a man cornered by his own choices. Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance. News vans were coming. Harmon muttered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But the cameras would show otherwise. The boy's video was already circulating on local social media. "Cop tries to throw Army officer out of helicopter. She stays calm like a hero." Maya's image filled the screen. Wind tearing at her hair, cuffs glinting like steel lightning. The internet was watching now, and Ridgefield County's secret wasn't staying quiet much longer. By the next morning, the small town of Ridgefield wasn't quiet anymore. News trucks lined the road by the diner. Camera crews moved like ants, searching for the best shot of the hangar where everything had happened. The air smelled of coffee, rain, and nerves. Inside the diner, conversations buzzed around one name, Sergeant Maya Cole. "She didn't even raise her voice," said one waitress, pouring refills. "They said she just stood there calm as a church bell." A man at the counter shook his head. "My cousin saw the video. Sheriff looked like he was the one in trouble." At the far booth, Sheriff Harmon sat stiffly, his untouched plate of eggs cooling by the minute. His badge lay face down on the table. Kellen entered, eyes darting. "Sir, it's everywhere now. That video's got nearly 300,000 views overnight." Harmon rubbed his temple. "I don't want numbers. I want silence." "You can't stop it," Kellen muttered. "People think she's some kind of hero." Harmon's jaw flexed. "She's a soldier. Soldiers follow orders. She should have listened." But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. Across town, in a borrowed Army trailer parked near the airfield, Maya Cole sat with Agent Lyle and 2 local reporters. She wore fresh fatigues, her wrists still marked by the cuffs. "You don't have to talk to them," Lyle reminded her quietly. "I do," she said. "If I stay silent, they'll fill the silence with their own story." The older reporter, Grace Parker, adjusted her recorder. "Sergeant Cole, the video shows you nearly being ejected from a county aircraft. Were you aware the sheriff was— I was aware he didn't check my ID before calling me a threat, Maya interrupted, her tone calm but edged. That's the story. Everything else is noise, Grace nodded. And you're staying here? After that? Maya looked toward the window where sunlight caught the dull metal of the helicopter outside. My mission didn't change. We're still mapping emergency routes. The people here deserve safety, whether they trust me or not. By afternoon, the county courthouse steps were full of microphones. The mayor, a nervous man in a tan suit, tried to control the narrative. There was a misunderstanding, he said. Sheriff Harmon acted in the interest of local safety, though. Certain procedures were not followed. From the crowd, a woman shouted, "She was cuffed and calm. What kind of safety is that?" The mayor hesitated. Cameras zoomed in. Behind the reporters, schoolteacher Laura Sims whispered to her friend, "You can feel it, can't you?" The town split down the middle. Half of Ridgefield defended the sheriff as a good man under pressure. The other half saw Maya as a symbol, someone who stood her ground without anger and in doing so, exposed something deeper, the quiet fear of authority unchecked. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Harmon stood alone at the airfield. The helicopter gleamed faintly in the fading light. He reached out and touched the cold metal skin of its door. Behind him, a voice. "You're thinking about that jump." It was Lyle. Harmon didn't turn. "I never meant to hurt her." Lyle stepped closer. Intent doesn't undo action. The sheriff exhaled, the sound more like a sigh than a breath. "You think I'm a bad man? I think you're a man who forgot the difference between control and leadership," Lyle replied. She didn't. Harmon's eyes flicked toward the town below, the diner, the houses, the courthouse wrapped in flashing lights. "They'll turn on me." "Not if you face it," Lyle said softly. "Not if you tell the truth before she has to." Later that night, Maya sat outside the trailer, the sky clear and filled with stars. Her phone buzzed, a message from her commanding officer. "Stand by. Washington reviewing footage. Do not engage further." She looked toward the dark silhouette of the sheriff's office. "Too late," she whispered. The world was already watching, and Ridgefield's balance of power was starting to tilt. The next morning brought gray skies and restless silence. The town that once waved at its sheriff now whispered about him. The diner's bell barely rang. The courthouse lawn was littered with camera tripods and questions nobody wanted to answer. At the county office, Sheriff Harmon sat at his desk, the blinds half closed. The sound of rain on the tin roof filled the gaps between thoughts he didn't want to face. On his computer screen, paused mid-frame, was the video. His own face frozen as he reached for the helicopter door. He slammed the lid shut. Deputy Kellen stood nearby, hands stuffed in his vest pockets. "Sir, the county board's called an emergency session. They want your side before the Army statement drops." Harmon looked up, his eyes heavy. "And what side is that, Kellen? The part where I ignored a soldier's ID? Or the part where I almost dropped her out of a chopper? Sir, you thought she was a threat." The sheriff leaned back slowly. "No, I thought I had to be the one in control. There's a difference." Meanwhile, across town at the field command trailer, Sergeant Maya Cole reviewed her mission files. Stacks of flight maps covered the table, each marking medical evacuation routes for flood response training. Agent Lyle stepped in, carrying a folder stamped Federal Inquiry, Ridgefield Incident. He placed it gently beside her coffee cup. "They're opening an official investigation. The sheriff will be questioned under oath." Maya didn't smile. "That's not what I wanted." "You wanted accountability," Lyle replied. "This is how it happens," she shook her head. "No, I wanted understanding. Accountability without learning is just punishment. He needs to see what he nearly destroyed." Lyle studied her. "You're not asking for leniency, are you?" "I'm asking for decency," she said quietly. By noon, the airfield had turned into an odd meeting ground. News crews on one side, county officials on the other, and Maya in between, preparing for her next aerial survey flight. She adjusted her harness, the same one she'd used to save herself days earlier. The memory flashed, wind, cuffs, the sheriff's boots inches from her shoulder. She exhaled and steadied her breath. A camera operator called out, "Sergeant, any words for Sheriff Harmon today?" Maya looked directly at the lens. "Only this. When you wear a badge or a uniform, you represent more than yourself. The moment you forget that, someone else pays the price." The reporter blinked. surprised by the restraint in her tone. Inside the hangar, Harmon watched from a distance. He'd come alone without his deputies. He carried a folded envelope, her torn ID taped carefully back together. When she saw him approach, she didn't flinch. "Sergeant," he began, voice rough. "I was told not to come near you till the hearing. But He stopped, holding out the envelope. "This belongs to you." Maya took it, studying the creases. "You fixed it. I had no right to break it," he admitted. "When I saw that patch on your sleeve, I didn't see service. I saw threat. And that's on me." She didn't speak for a moment. The rain pattered on the hangar roof like a slow metronome. "Sheriff," she said finally. "We all make decisions in seconds. The difference between pride and duty is what you do after those seconds." His throat tightened. "What would you do if you were me?" "I'd start telling the truth," she said, "even if it costs your badge." As she turned toward the helicopter, Harmon's radio buzzed again, dispatch crackling faintly. "Sheriff Harmon, report to County Board at 1500 hours for inquiry review." He shut his eyes, the weight of consequence settling in. Outside, the rain cleared. A faint rainbow arched above the airfield. He watched as Maya's chopper lifted, its rotors carving through the clearing sky. And for the first time, Harmon didn't feel the urge to control it. He simply watched it rise, steady, unafraid, and free. The inquiry chamber of Ridgefield County Hall was quiet enough to hear the clock ticking. Rows of folding chairs held reporters, townsfolk, and officers from nearby precincts. Cameras blinked red lights like patient eyes. At the front, Sheriff Harmon stood under oath. His hands trembled slightly as he swore in. Agent Lyle sat beside the board chair, observing in silence. Sergeant Maya Cole was seated 2 rows behind, still in uniform, back straight, eyes calm. The board chair, Evelyn Merritt, a woman in her 60s with a calm, commanding tone, began. "Sheriff Harmon, we've reviewed the footage taken from the ground, but we now have aerial data from Army Command. Before we proceed, you need to see this." She turned toward the large projection screen. The room dimmed. The video began, grainy black and white, time-stamped from the helicopter's own surveillance system. At first, it looked identical to the viral footage, until the angle shifted. From above, the recording showed everything. Harmon's hand on the latch, Maya's restraint, and, most striking, the moment she caught the safety cable instead of falling. Then the audio synced in. Maya's voice. "You really don't know who I am," followed by dispatch. "Federal identification confirmed. Do not engage." And then, just before Harmon froze, another faint sound, the pilot's voice captured clearly. "Sir, if you push her, this aircraft will destabilize. We'll all go down," the room murmured. The board members leaned forward. Harmon stared at the screen, pale. Evelyn Merritt paused the playback. "Sheriff, would you like to amend your statement? You claimed she was attempting to resist arrest mid-flight." He opened his mouth, closed it again. I didn't realize the camera caught that." Agent Lyle spoke, breaking the silence. "Sir, the sky was watching, and it doesn't lie." The chair nodded. "Sheriff, do you understand that Sergeant Cole's composure not only prevented tragedy but possibly saved every life aboard that aircraft?" The sheriff looked at Maya, finally meeting her eyes. "I do now." Maya stood slowly. "Madam Chair, I'd like to speak." Permission granted, she stepped forward. Her boots echoed across the floor. "Sheriff Harmon made a grave mistake," she began, her voice even. "But he also grounded the aircraft after realizing the risk. No one was hurt. I don't want to see another public servant destroyed for a moment of arrogance. I want him educated, not erased." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyle whispered under his breath, "She's disarming them again." Maya continued, "The system works when accountability teaches, not when it only punishes. If I can still fly after that fall, he can still lead, if he learns how to see people as partners, not suspects." The board fell silent. Evelyn Merritt nodded slowly. "Sergeant, your restraint honors your service. Sheriff Harmon, this department will place you on suspension pending retraining and review. You'll attend joint exercises under military supervision." Harmon nodded, almost relieved. Understood. The cameras flashed as the gavel struck once. Outside, the crowd broke into hushed conversations. Some applauded, others just stared. Rain clouds cleared overhead, sunlight filtering through. Harmon approached Maya by the courthouse steps. "You could have buried me," he said. "I could have," she replied softly. "But I'd rather rebuild something worth trusting." He nodded, the humility new in his eyes. "Then teach me, Sergeant," Maya smiled faintly. "First lesson, don't call me suspect." They both laughed quietly, a small human sound amid the storm of attention. Inside one of the news vans, a young producer watched the Army footage replay again and again. He turned to his editor. "You see that? She saved his life and his badge." The editor nodded. "Yeah, but wait till you hear what's next." The producer frowned. "Next?" The editor grinned. Turns out that helicopter's flight logs were classified. Someone ordered it off record, and she wasn't the only one being followed that day. The hum of the airfield filled the audio feed once more. Ominous, unresolved. The truth wasn't done flying yet. 3 days later, Ridgefield's once quiet airfield looked like a small fortress. Military trucks idled near the hangars marked Training and Joint Response Unit. Reporters were still camped outside the fence, their cameras trained on anyone in uniform. Inside one of the portable offices, Sergeant Maya Cole sat reviewing a file stamped Classified Internal Flight Logs. The light flickered overhead. Humming softly, Agent Lyle entered holding 2 paper cups. "Black, no sugar," he said, placing one near her hand. "Thought you could use something that doesn't come with a press badge attached?" Maya smiled faintly. "You heard?" "Everyone heard. Half the state's talking about the Army's hidden flight routes," he replied. "But what they don't know is that your name wasn't the only one on that manifest." Maya leaned forward. "Meaning?" He opened a folder. "The helicopter Harmon used wasn't logged under county property. It was borrowed from a private contractor working with the Army. The same one funding the medical mapping drills." Her brow furrowed. "So this wasn't random. Someone set this up." Lyle nodded slowly. "And someone wanted that footage buried." At the sheriff's office, Harmon sat alone, stripped of his badge for now, the silver star locked away in a drawer. He read the paper headline, "Army Sergeant Saves County Sheriff from Disaster and from Himself." Below it, another line, "Federal Inquiry Expands into Contracted Flights." He folded the paper carefully. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," he called. It was Kellen holding an envelope. "They said it's from the Army office, sir." "Well, not sir, but—" Harmon gestured for him to continue. Kellen laid the letter on the desk. The header read, "Notice of Temporary Assignment. Civilian Oversight Liaison, Ridgefield County." Harmon exhaled slowly. "They're sending someone to monitor me." "Actually," Kellen said, scratching his neck, "they're sending her." Harmon froze. "Maya Cole?" Kellen nodded. "She'll be working side by side with you during retraining." The sheriff leaned back, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. The universe has a sense of humor. Later that afternoon, Maya arrived at the county station in her crisp fatigue jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbow. She nodded to Harmon as she entered. "New office?" she asked lightly. He gestured to the cluttered desks and the fading Integrity First poster. "Such as it is." They stood in a brief silence. "I read the logs," she said. "That flight, someone ordered it rerouted. It wasn't supposed to be over restricted ground." Harmon frowned. "But I was told to follow that route." "Orders came from the contractor's office, which is now under review," she replied. "There's more going on here than bad judgment. Someone wanted you baited and me silenced." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because our humanitarian drill was mapping evacuation corridors," she said. "If those routes leaked to private hands, they'd have access to government flight patterns." "That's not an accident." Lyle entered just then, files in hand. "She's right. We've confirmed tampering with the dispatch system. Whoever did it wanted the chopper off radar. You were pawns in something bigger." Harmon let out a shaky breath. "So my worst day wasn't even mine to begin with." "Maybe," Maya said. "But how we respond next, that's ours." By nightfall, the town's main street was alive again. Locals gathered at the diner watching the news. The headline ticker scrolled, "Federal probe expands to private air logistics firm. Ridgefield officials cooperating." Inside, Laura Sims, the schoolteacher, murmured to her neighbor, "See? She didn't destroy the sheriff. She rebuilt him." Outside, Harmon and Maya walked toward the parked military truck, the cool evening air between them. "You ever think this town can forgive me?" Harmon asked quietly. Maya looked toward the glowing diner windows. "Maybe not right away. But forgiveness isn't a gift, Sheriff. It's proof someone's still watching, hoping you do better next time." He nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I intend to." As they drove away, the camera crews finally started to pack up. But one lens lingered on the departing truck, catching a small detail glinting in the taillight glow. A metallic tag, wedged near the bumper, stamped with a contractor code. Axiom Aerospace Systems. The same name that had quietly disappeared from the flight registry 2 days earlier. The real story hadn't landed yet. It was still circling above them. 2 weeks later, Ridgefield County was no longer a breaking headline but a case study. The TV trucks had moved on. The town, once torn by whispers, was slowly finding its voice again. At dawn, Sergeant Maya Cole stood near the same airfield where everything had begun. The air was cool, thin, and peaceful. The helicopter, the same one that had nearly ended her life, was grounded beside her, gleaming after repairs. Its rotors turned lazily in the breeze. Beside her, Sheriff Dale Harmon adjusted his new liaison badge, a plain nameplate with no shine. His uniform looked humbler now. No gold pins, no swagger, just duty. He cleared his throat. "Training starts in 10 minutes. Half the department's nervous." Maya smiled softly. "That's good. Nerves mean they're listening." "Funny," he said. "I used to think fear was a weakness." She turned to him. "Fear's a compass, Sheriff. The question is, what direction you point it?" He nodded slowly, eyes on the horizon. "Never thought I'd be taking orders from the woman I tried to throw out of the sky." Maya chuckled gently. "And yet here we are, grounded and learning." Inside the hangar, folding chairs were lined in 2 neat rows. Deputies, state troopers, and even a few city officers from nearby towns had come for the joint training. The banner read, "Courage Through Accountability, Ridgefield Pilot Program." Agent Lyle stood at the back, observing quietly. He leaned toward Grace Parker, the local reporter. "Quite the turnaround," she whispered. "Public redemption beats punishment any day," Lyle murmured. "The Army's using this model for other counties now." One story fixed a system. As the training began, Maya addressed the room. "When you wear a badge or a uniform," she said, "people don't see your name first. They see what the title represents. That's power. But power without understanding turns into fear. And fear in uniform becomes danger." Her eyes found Harmon in the front row. "We all make mistakes. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's admitting it, and then leading anyway." A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Maya stepped back. "Now Sheriff Harmon will share what he learned the hard way." He rose slowly, holding a printed photo, the freeze frame of the helicopter door mid-open. "This," he began, "is the moment I thought control was the same thing as authority. But the woman standing next to me," he nodded toward Maya, "proved I was wrong. Control is about fear. Authority's about trust." He paused, emotion tightening his throat. "And I'd rather earn trust than command fear." The room was silent. Then soft applause began, first from the deputies, then the troopers, then everyone. Outside, as the session ended, the sheriff and sergeant walked to the edge of the runway. The sun was higher now, painting the airfield gold. A single child's kite, bright red, fluttered above the fence, dipping and soaring in the wind. Maya shaded her eyes. "Funny. The sky feels smaller now." Harmon smiled. "Or maybe we finally learned to stand on the right ground." Lyle approached, handing each of them an envelope. "Formal clearance," he said. "Investigations closed. Contractors facing charges. And Sheriff, Your suspension's lifted. County board reinstated you this morning. Harmon blinked. Why me? Because Sergeant Cole vouched for you, Lyle said simply. She told them a man who's learned humility is safer for this town than any replacement. The sheriff looked at her, words failing him. She just nodded. It's not about forgiveness, Sheriff. It's about growth. He smiled, voice quiet. Then maybe it's time I start earning it. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of laughter from the diner down the road. The boy who once filmed the viral video rode by on his bike, waving. Maya waved back, the moment tender and unspoken. The same sky that once tried to take her now shimmered calm above them. 6 months had passed since the day the wind almost took Sergeant Maya Cole's life. Ridgefield had changed, not through speeches or new laws, but through small, human acts that lasted longer than headlines. The airfield, once a symbol of chaos, now held monthly joint training sessions between local officers and military personnel. The banner over the hangar simply read, "Serve with honor." Kids from the nearby school visited on field trips, watching helicopters lift into the blue, safe and steady. At the far end of the runway, a small garden had been planted where the old helicopter first touched down. Rows of bright marigolds bordered a single stone plaque. For every moment courage outshines pride. The plaque bore 2 names, Sergeant Maya Cole and Sheriff Dale Harmon. In town, life had resumed its gentle rhythm. The diner's bell rang again, and the talk was no longer about scandal. It was about gratitude. A framed newspaper front page hung on the wall. Ridgefield's second chance. Laura Sims, the schoolteacher, served pie at the counter and told newcomers, "That's the place where the sheriff learned to listen. And the soldier taught us all how to stand tall." The boy who once filmed the viral video was now part of the youth cadet program, learning aviation basics from Maya herself. One clear afternoon, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up near the hangar. Harmon stepped out wearing a simpler uniform. No medals, no ceremony. Just a nameplate that read D. Harmon. Maya was already there, guiding the cadets through safety checks on a grounded helicopter. Her voice carried with quiet assurance. When she saw him, she smiled. "You're late for inspection," he grinned. "I figured if anyone's allowed to bend the rules around here, it's the guy who almost fell out of the sky trying to enforce them." She shook her head, laughing. "You've come a long way, Sheriff." "Not far enough," he said. "But I'm walking the right direction." He handed her a small box, plain, brown, unmarked. Inside was the piece of torn ID he'd once broken, now laminated and mounted on a plaque. "I thought it belonged where it can't be torn again," he said. Maya ran her finger over the glass. "Thank you, Dale." For the first time, she called him by his first name. As the sun dipped low, they stood outside together, watching the cadets raise their first small drone into the air, a tiny silver speck circling gracefully above. "Looks steady," Harmon said. "It is," Maya replied softly. "The sky doesn't change, Sheriff. Only how we move through it." The drone hovered above them, its faint hum echoing the memory of rotors long past. Neither of them flinched this time. They just watched. Above, the clouds glowed with a faint streak of orange and pink, like the horizon itself was remembering what it had almost lost. Maya slipped her hands into her pockets, her dog tags glinting briefly in the evening light. "You ever wonder why some of us fall and some of us fly?" Harmon looked at her with a quiet smile. "Maybe flying isn't about leaving the ground. Maybe it's about learning what keeps you steady when you can't." She nodded. "That'll do." The camera would fade there, 2 figures standing side by side, framed by the calm sky that once tried to tear them apart. And for the first time since that morning, everything felt still. And thanks for watching.